In this video, Senator Elizabeth Warren underscores the critical role of the Federal Reserve Chair, Jerome Powell, amid President Trump's potential attempts to dismiss him, asserting that while Trump lacks legal authority, his actions could threaten the autonomy of financial regulators and destabilize markets. In addition, Elizabeth highlights the historical importance of maintaining the Fed's independence from political pressures to ensure economic stability.
Understand this. If Chairman Powell can be fired by the President of the United States, it will crash the markets in the United States. The infrastructure that keeps this stock market strong and therefore a big part of our economy strong and therefore a big part of the world economy strong is the idea that the big pieces move independent of the politics, that somebody is making his, their, her best decisions economically and independently. If we understand that if the New York Stock Exchange, if interest rates in the United States are subject to a president who just wants to wave his magic wand, this doesn't distinguish us then from any other two-bit dictatorship around the world where everyone knows what your big investment risk is. Will that dictator wake up in the morning and have a tummy ache and decide to cause this problem or favor that friend? That's why we need to strengthen the infrastructure.
But I know you are not the president, but you have also been very vocal in terms of wanting Fed Chair Powell to cut interest rates.
Sure.
Especially when he was raising it. And you and I have talked about, like, maybe you shouldn't inject your politics into the Fed. That's essentially all he's doing here.
Oh, that's the question. When he talks about terminating Powell, come on.
No, he said his termination cannot come soon enough. His term ends next year.
You think he was saying term in? Look, I hope he was saying term in. I think what he's doing is testing the waters. Does he think he can get away with firing Powell and all of you won't raise any hell about that? He's checking that out. And I'm just saying, for the strength of our country, I hope all of you are pushing back at this point.
Well, the bond market certainly would push back significantly.
Absolutely.
We're not seeing it as much today. I do wonder, they have taken a case to the Supreme Court in which they're testing the ability of the president to fire heads of independent agencies. Is that an important decision? It may be some time until we hear of it, but if the court should side with the Trump administration, does that embolden him to move faster on Powell, for example?
Absolutely. That is the question that's going to the United States Supreme Court. But I just want you to note, even the government's briefs so far, at least as they've laid their argument out going to the Supreme Court, even they are itchy-scratchy about saying that would include the Fed. You know, can we just remember why we do this? Going back to 1863, our first financial regulator, the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, still exists today. What did we do? We made them right in the middle of the Civil War. We decided we've got to have a bank regulator for stability, right? Financial stability in our country. We made that bank regulator financially independent of Congress. It was a way to try to say, look, we understand what happens if elected officials, Congress or the President of the United States, can hear from a constituent, can hear from a donor, and then bring pressure on those financial regulators. Ultimately, it undercuts the entire economic system and makes us all vulnerable. Every financial regulator since then, the OCC, the credit industry, the CFPB, the old OTS, all of them have been financially independent. And we need to preserve that, not for the politics of the moment, not for whether I think the interest rate should go up or down 3 months ago when we had such a strong economy. But we need to preserve it because overall, that's what keeps the system strong year after year, decade after decade.
You would agree jawboning between the executive and the Fed is nothing new, right?
Jawboning is different.
How is it different than this? I mean, I'm curious. How is it different than this, this post?
Partly, jawboning occurs out in public, but nobody threatens anybody's job. At the end of the day, presidents always, even in the jawboning, have said, I recognize you are the one who makes the decision. Look, I will try to persuade Jerome Powell.
You once said he would be responsible for 2 million job cuts.
I believe that. I am glad to do that. I do it in hearings. It's called oversight. but it's all out in public. Anybody can see it, and I don't threaten his job. And the President of the United States should not threaten.
He has said before he's not going to mess with Powell's job. Powell and Besson have lunch every week following a longstanding tradition. So I don't think the market's alarmed about it because I don't think they think that that's where it's going.
Well, if you want to rely on what President Trump said a few weeks ago, that's fine. Are you one of the people who relied on the fact that he would never, never, never back down from those tariffs? Or are you one of those people who said, no, now what he's going to do is a 10% across the board, but no exceptions? Oh, are you one of those people who said, I believe the president when he said it's going to be the exception for that donor and that friend and that one who is in my business?
So